Hello and welcome to the North Metro SBDC programming.
Welcome, everyone. And I'm just kind of looking through all of your information because I think that given the details that you provide us really helps in terms of this 1 hour and a half to be able to give you the best information that I think will carry um, your next level information and the needs that you have to what you're needing. So I'm just kind of looking over this and great. Thanks a lot for putting that information in. It looks like many of you are startups and Laura. Oh yeah, good to see you, Laura. Good to have you on again. Right on. Um, and then looks like some of you are in other parts of the metro area. Great to see that. And we've got a couple of people starting to jump on. So I'm not going to actually start this for another 2 or 3 minutes because I want to make sure that those are that are working through here are able to get all of the information that that we start. Susan's jumping on. Good. Looks like some of you have been in business already. Most of you are just startups. That's good. This is a startup orientation, so we're going to give you as much information as we can give you in the 1 hour and a half time period. Okay, like, okay. Well, if I would, it looks like we might have everyone that is going to be on. You'll take care of the stragglers. You'll click them on. All right. Welcome everyone. Startup orientation. My name is Jesse Esparza. Um, did- um, this afternoon, I'm going to provide you just really with the very important details to what you probably can use in the future. So I am a certified consultant, and now they call us advisors. We used to be counselors, consultants, now we're advisors. Huh. Anyway, there's my email, and I want you to be able to have this information. I think what I'll do is just make sure that Raul gives you some of this information. You can copy it, but the whole point of this is that North Metro SBDC provides some key support for you all. And here are some of the services that we at North Metro offer. So think about the professional information that you can get, and it can be free. This is a place to go. We offer one-on-one consulting, and that means that you can get yourself registered with the North Metro SBDC, and we have several advisors, not just myself. There are probably about 7 or 8 of us. There are those that are specialties in terms of marketing. Some of them are very specialized with, say, finances. Some are very specialized with the legal components. We have a couple of attorneys. You can jump on, get some resources and 1 hour sessions as you are working through to develop your business. And that is part of the training and education as well that we have. When we think about the resources that you all need, believe me, we have templates that are for financial templates, marketing templates, and just different type of templates that I think could really be a good resource for you. And not just that, we'll introduce you to some of the resources that we connect to, such as libraries. I always tell individuals that are, that come to me for one-on-one sessions. When you come to the SBDC, we connect you to a library, and a library probably already can provide you with about $2,000 worth of resources that they have. And we connect with different libraries throughout the Front Range. So keep that in mind. As startups, we know that you're bootstrapping your business. So any additional resources that you can get and can be free, I know that that'll help. We'll help you get some contacts. We work with economic developers, directors, with chambers, and we'll help you establish some contacts with those individuals. And not only that, but show you how to make those contacts so that you can have better access to those resources that are, in some cases, that you have to pay for or that you have to become members to. We do not have money, but part of what we do a lot and with great effort is connect you to the lenders. And um, personally, I work with probably 15 different type of lenders, whether it be the banks, micro lenders, and some maybe even possible some angel investors, so that you can connect to different type of banks as well. So just keep those resources in mind. They are very, I think, very important for you to have access to as a startup. Remember that our mission really as an SBDC is to help businesses start and grow and really prosper. That's the bottom line. That's all we do. And we're here to provide the services. This afternoon, what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at basically these 5 components. So I'm going to introduce you in a very general sense, nothing that is very specific, because in an hour and a half, all I think we want to do, and our goal is to give you an overview of what is important to consider in terms of a startup. So we'll go through the legal components, the business entities, the registration, those kinds of things. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about your branding, why that's important. We'll go over some organizational structure components, the taxes. I'm not an accountant, but I will give you general information that I think will be helpful, that you can then connect to your own accountants. And then, of course, the foundation to any good business and a long-term probability of success is the business plan. And I'll introduce to you different types of business plans that I think can be very helpful to you. And please, if there's any questions as we go through, as Raul said, I will stop and you can just interrupt. And I like that approach because it gives you an opportunity to ask the question as you need it at that moment, and you don't have to wait too long. You can also raise your hand, and I'll try to cue into that information, but I know Raul will be there to guide me for that in case I miss you on that. When you think about a startup, I want you to think about yourself. These are the images of those individuals, such as yourself, that may have, a startup from the very beginning to maybe a year in business. So 93% of small business owners are those that have less than 250,000 already. And most of you are family owned. Maybe you have one individual in your business, yourself, and the business itself is probably a home-based business. Now, on the other side, the success rate, as you can imagine, the first year, it's not 85% success rate. It's actually 85% of those first year do not have success and ultimately dissolve. So the reality is that it's harder the first year. And as you begin to learn the process, because remember, you may be great at what you do, and I applaud that you all have a great talent. But business is another arena, and that is a whole different concept. And so learning business is important. After about the second or third year, it begins to give you a little bit of knowledge of how to run a business, and the success rate continues to grow. And that is why we want to provide these type of workshops and seminars, is to give you the opportunity to get the one-on-one sessions to learn the components that are essential so that you have a greater probability of success. Remember, in the state of Colorado, generally 7% of the first year businesses are successful. And we try really hard to continue to help you grow through that process. We're going to start with the components of the legal structure, because that is really the foundation to any good business outcome. Is once you establish the kind of business, the type of entity that you want, then ultimately you're going to have a higher probability, because you're looking at probably three things. One is you're defining the type of taxation that you are going to obtain or be responsible for, and also the kind of the legal foundation and the liability that you're going to establish for yourself. There are basically four type of components in the state of Colorado that you can establish yourself as. One is a sole proprietorship, and I'll talk about that one. And maybe some of you, as I was looking through the list, some of you are already probably sole proprietors. The other one is a general partnership. Anyone who has a combination of owners collectively, you probably are already general partnerships. Limited partnerships, limited liability companies, those are all different type of entities. And then, of course, we have the corporations. So I will be generally talking about these four type. And again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. So the first type that I'm going to discuss is going to be the single sole proprietorship. That type of entity really is an individual who probably is already doing some sort of business. It's an individual who, anyone that trades their product or service for money in the state of Colorado is already considered to be a sole proprietor. You don't have to have a business name. If you do it under your own name, you still are considered to be a sole proprietor. That means that all the liability that you have is on you, your individual. You do not have to register, but as soon as you pick a name that is different than yourself, that then makes you a DBA, doing business as. And in the state of Colorado, you do have to register a DBA. So the positive components of a sole proprietorship are that really they're very inexpensive, because ultimately they are entities that are you. And you may pick a name of the business, but it's still doing business as your personal assets that you're carrying with you. Anyone over the age of 18 can become a sole proprietor, and any profits that this business creates are passed on to you, the individual, and actually the business does not pay any taxes. It's you, the individual, that pays taxes at whatever bracket you might be at. So it's very simple. You can do it under your own personal bank account, as long as you keep good records. And so you don't have to separate those items. The detriments become a little bit different in that anything that this individual does in decision making for the business really they are doing it under their own name as well. So the decisions of the business are inseparable from the individual person, and any asset that that individual owns belongs also to the business. Therefore, it has unlimited liability, meaning you do not have any protection whatsoever under this business, because any errors or situations that occur that could be liable become the personal liability as well to that individual. Remember that the business will dissolve upon the change of ownerships. If you decide to sell the business and and let's say the business is doing well, making some good profits, you cannot pass that business over to your children. You can't sell it as the same business. It would just basically have to be dissolved. And that's the end of that business. So, in a sense, it's very simple, but it carries some high cost as well. Now, the general partnership, I will state that everything I said about the sole proprietorship, I will also echo in that the same apply for the general partnership, except that it is more than one individual. So that means that in the partnership, you do not have to have a specific name. Two people can run a business as long as they don't create any names. As soon as they create a name for that business, then they would have to register in the state of Colorado. And they too are DBAs. It is important to establish an operating agreement. As you can imagine, having one person make the decisions like a sole proprietorship, that decision is solely on that individual. But as soon as you have more than one individual, now you have the opportunity for many disagreements. And that's why a operating agreement is very important as you begin to operate a general partnership. They are very inexpensive. The positives are that with having more than one individual in the business means that you have the opportunity to bring in additional capital. And the same applies that you can have more than two individuals. And if, say, the business is needing additional capital, you can add another person into the business without having all the red tape. And that still becomes a general partnership as long as that person brings in some of the additional capital that is needed. So those are good examples of how a general partnership can be effective and the positive components to it. The detriments are the same. They are inseparable. And even more so in the fact that if Raul and I are in business and I make a decision that is for the partnership, Raul has to live with that business, that decision as well. If it's not a good decision, then the consequences also fall on Raul. So the reality of this inseparable of the owners is really important, because another reason to have agreements established and a good plan when you're doing a general partnership. If one partner leaves or two partners, or however many, and it's left with one, then obviously that has to be diverted back to a sole proprietorship. Any questions so far on these two components? Very, very simple type of entities. As you know, the state has tried to define them to make them simple and not too complex. Okay.
Looks like Regina.
Yeah,
You
Regina,
have a question?
you're muted, Regina. You're still muted.
So
Okay.
Will we be able to get a copy of this handout? I'm taking notes, but can we print up this presentation or get a copy from you guys somehow?
As long as you ask Raul, I mean, we're not just giving them out. Everyone that wants to have one has to request one, and then that way it goes to those individuals that want one. How's that sound? Good?
Beautiful. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So the next type of entity becomes a little bit more difficult, but also a little bit more protected, and that is the limited liability company. And this is where it gets a little bit complex. You know, when you think about a limited liability company, that type of entity now is very strictly defined by IRS and the state of Colorado. And that is that you have to register your business and you have to have a name that is separable from your proper name. So, in other words, you cannot have a limited liability that's called Jesse Esparza. It has to have something in there. Jesse Esparza Services, the Jesse Esparza Store. It has to have something. So that's very important as it relates to the guidelines. The other part of a limited liability company is that it is, in fact, a concept that separates all of your assets, personal, from your business assets. And that's really important. And the reason that you probably want a limited liability company is for you to protect your personal assets. And I'll get a little bit more into that in a little bit. A limited liability company can have a single owner, but it can also have multiple owners. And therein lies, again, one of the big opportunities, assets that come from a limited liability company, and that is that the partnership does not have the protection that a limited liability company has. Therefore, to have multiple owners, sometimes it's more advantageous to be a limited liability company than to be a partnership. Think about that. So you can treat a limited liability company as a limited partnership as well. It is a separate legal entity, and every individual that is an owner is called a member. The limited liability company does need the document that's called the Articles of Organization. And here is where you have to follow some very strict guidelines that the state IRS and the federal IRS define. One is, obviously, as I said, you have to register it. The second most important component to follow is that you have got to obtain an employee identification number through the IRS. You cannot use your Social Security like you can with a sole proprietorship and a partnership. The third thing that you have to do with a limited liability is you must organize it so that the IRS can define your profits on a quarterly basis. You have to have a bank account that is separate from your personal bank account, and it's got to have the EIN number with it. And you must also file quarterly taxes on your profits. And that's why you have to have the limited liability company organized on a monthly basis so that you have the ability to know how much you have created in a quarter, which means then you submit your quarterly taxes every quarter if you make profits. You do have protection in terms of the liability that this entity does create for you. But you will lose the liability protection if you commingle. And that is really important. So here, let me give you an example. So I am just starting out a business. I registered my business with the Secretary of State, and now I'm officially a business. So the reason that I became a limited liability company is to protect all my personal assets. But a week from now, I went and I purchased a printer, and I purchased a printer at Office Max, and I used my personal credit card to do that. Well, guess what? As soon as I used my personal credit card, I just broke my protection. And officially now I am just a sole proprietor. And therein lies the commingling that occurs for many of small business owners. And they don't even know that. And that's something that is really important, that once you become officially a business, then you cannot commingle any personal assets with your business. So keep that in mind. As long as you keep everything separate, all members are protected. And furthermore, once you continue to grow, your limited liability company can be treated as a corporation as well. So those are the really advantages of having a limited liability company, as long as you keep things separate. The detriments are really that they can be costly, because if I am the only member in my limited liability company, probably it's not going to cost me a whole lot. I am the only one that's going to make the decisions, and I am the only one that's going to set it up to work in my best interest. If I have more than one individual, it could become very costly just by the mere fact that I probably will need an attorney, and I may need to hire accountants, because if there's more than one individual, then the operating agreement becomes very essential, and also how we're going to run this business, who's going to do what. If I have more than two people, it becomes even more important to establish a good operating agreement. So in other words, the more individuals you have in a limited liability company, the higher cost it probably is going to cost you. You cannot operate a limited liability company in another state, because it has to only operate within the state of Colorado. You can open another limited liability company in another state, but it has to have, a different responsibility and components that are subject to that state. Any questions on a limited liability company? Okay. I will talk about corporations in a very general sense. Okay, Susan, tell me, what's your question?
Yes. Your comment about not being able to operate in another state, I have a question about that. So for my business, it's sound healing. What if somebody pays me to go do a sound healing session in another state?
If you go to another state, Susan, and you actually get the money in that state, then you are operating your business in that state, and therefore you have to open another business in that state. You can operate, but you have to make sure that they pay you back in the state of Colorado.
So is that like, can they write me a check and I deposit it to my business account, or they deposit, the money into my business account? Does that count for what you're saying?
I would suspect, but that would be definitely something you want to talk to your accountant with, as to how that's going to actually be legal, so that when you work in another state, that you get paid in the state of Colorado.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
There's
Regina?
one more question in the
Yeah.
chat.
Yeah.
Stephanie's asking, on an LLC, how many DBAs can you have?
You can have as many DBAs under your under your LLC as you want, as long as they are connected to the same industry, maybe looking at the same concept. I mean, remember that part of what is going to be an accountant issue is that with the IRS that you are purchasing products and or using materials that operate the DBA that is connected to the LLC. In other words, you have to be careful that, for example, if I have a LLC that's food and it's a food industry, but then I have a DBA that's construction, it may not be too connected. So I got to be careful to be sure that what I'm doing under the DBA has connections to what I'm doing as the LLC. Okay, hopefully that answered the question. Any other questions? Okay, single or multiple owners for corporations. Remember, again, it's a matter of that a corporation is the concept that it is in fact separate from the individual. And you can have a single individual own a corporation, or you can have multiple owners. The concept of the corporation is that it is operated under shares. And so an S corporation, for example, would have less than 75 shares, and what the owner owns as compared to the members of that corporation would be defined based on the amount of shares that the individual has. These are separate legal entities that ultimately are definitely created separately for the purpose of business. Usually, and most likely, a corporation is going to have a board of directors, and those individuals are responsible for the decisions and the rules of the corporation. You can have individuals actually be hired through the corporation, and anyone that is a shareholder can also be part of an employee of a corporation. The corporations must adopt bylaws. In other words, the board of directors are the individuals who set up the bylaws, and the corporation is based on the articles of incorporation. That's the difference in terms of the LLC. The LLC obviously is the articles of it, the articles of I forget of it's not of incorporation. It's the different article. Sorry. The other part must be that the corporation must also do annual share meeting, and that's important just to be able to keep the information legal for the IRS. Sorry, articles organization. That's right. Sorry about that. The piece that is important to the corporation is that unlike the sole proprietorship and the partnership and the LLC, those entities you cannot be employees or an employer of that type of entity. In a corporation, you can be an employee, you can be an employer, and you can be the individual that's part of the board of directors. So the sole proprietorship you cannot collect wages. The partnership, you cannot collect wages. And the LLC, you cannot collect wages. You just have to take out money out of those type of entities. Whereas the corporation, you literally can take out your money through a wage, which would be a paycheck. The corporation probably has a better advantage, and it's better suited to keep your personal assets separate from your business assets. Also, the shareholders are always protected, and the distribution of the shareholder income is also something that is a little bit more advantageous in that the corporation can actually create profit through the wages, but it can also create profits through some of the distribution of dividends. And the corporate veil can be pierced, meaning that, as I said, the corporation has the best advantage in protecting all their assets and information because it's more of a private entity than the LLC and the sole proprietorships. Just a little bit about the S Corp, because that's probably one that a lot of small business owners work towards as compared to a C Corp. And the S Corp really is, in essence, a very separate legal entity, and it's separated by a special form that must be submitted, which is a 2553 form to define it as a corporation. So in other words, again, the little complexity of this concept of the entity is that if you are an LLC, you can become a corporation by defining yourself with this form, submitting it, and now you've become an S Corp. The S Corps must file within 75 days to become incorporated, and there's a timeline that must be adhered to. Profits do pass through the individuals of the shareholders, and they are taxed at the individual level. So in other words, if there is in fact several shareholders, they would get a portion of the profits, and each one would pay at their individual bracket of whatever that would be based on their own personal brackets. S corporations probably need to be at least adhered through and established through attorneys, accountants, because they can be a little bit more complex. Okay. Any questions on these so far? Remember that these are really more the very sophisticated type of entities, and they are more regulated than, say, an LLC and a sole proprietorship. S corps are very connected in the sense that they are corporate income taxes. So you literally can separate your business to be taxed on its own, and then your wages could be taxed on your individual tax bracket. S corps have the best liability protection of all of the entities, as opposed to, say, what an LLC or a sole proprietorship would have. They can raise capital in comparison to what a LLC can do in a sole proprietorship. The thing about S corps is that they are domestic corporations and they're not international. They only have one class of stock, whereas a C corp can have an A and a B stock, and S Corp has only a C stock. They can be costly, therefore, it's something that must be considered in terms of how you're going to run them and the type of industry that you're getting into can also be a costly endeavor towards all of preparation for that industry. Okay, so generally, again, as I said, the S Corp is probably a little bit more sophisticated than when you think about a sole proprietorship. But if you work your way through the process of development, you can start as a sole proprietorship and dissolve it and become an LLC. You can take the LLC, make it into a corporation, and work your way into a little bit more protection as you grow the business. Questions? So what's important is to really be thinking about this type of structure that you're going to create or have already created. Where are you going? It's really important to understand who will be the owners, what's the ultimate control that you want out of this type of entity, how will it be managed, what are your growth, where are you going, and what type of assets will this business hold. This is all important as you begin to determine the type of entity that you're going to create. Once you have established the type of entity and you know what type of entity you're going to set up, now it's important for you to go through the steps to make it all legal. So the first step is to register with the Secretary of State. Critical, very important. And then defining what type of name you're going to create. Once you have step one completed, then you need to go to the irs.gov and obtain an EIN. You do not need an EIN if you are a sole proprietorship or a partnership, but you can still use an EIN even with a sole proprietorship or a partnership. If you are an LLC or a corporation, you must have an EIN. The Secretary of State for a sole proprietorship is going to cost you $25. The partnership, $25. The LLC and the corporation is going to cost you $50. The IRS does not charge anything for the EIN. If you go to Google and you Google EIN, you're going to get companies that are going to charge you $150, $200 for an EIN. Just be prepared. You go straight to the irs.gov and you don't get charged anything. The third most important component is for you to register your business for a sales tax if you have a product. And some cities will even make you register for sales tax even if you have a service. So that's going to depend on, the city where you're at. You can obtain all of the 3 steps through mybiz.colorado. It's a great site. If you go to colorado.gov and just put in the search engine MyBiz Colorado, and it takes you through all the steps of 1, 2, and 3 of what you have to do. We're still in the process. We are in limbo with the beneficial ownership information. You do not have to fill it out. It's right now in a state of limbo. And we are still in the process of waiting to hear back to see what the situation is going to occur with the legal aspect of the situation with that program. Most cities will require you to operate your business with a business license. So that's the next step that you will at least inquire with your city to determine if, in fact, you will need a business license to operate. Most cities along the Front Range will require a business license for you to operate your business. And then the sixth step is obviously for you to obtain the bank account. In the state of Colorado, um, you're not required to have insurance, but most of you will see that in order to do business with other businesses or to sell your products and services, even your consumers or potential clients will require you to have insurance. And then, of course, it's always good to have an action plan. Any questions on the registration process? Okay. It is important to think about insurance, as I said, even though it's not required. One of the things that is really critical in a business is to know when to obtain the kind of insurance that is relative to what your needs are. And along the circle, it shows all the different kinds of insurance that you can obtain. You can have insurance for your building, for your furniture, your machinery, payroll, cargo inventory. All of these are types of insurance that you can obtain. Insurance agents may want you to have all of these, but really, in all reality, be thinking about what is it that you truly need as a startup. There are probably three types of insurance that are relative to your business. One is a general business liability insurance. That's the type of insurance that's going to protect you against the losses of anything that happens in your business. It's something that probably would not be a bad idea for you to obtain and to get. And you have the big boxes, Farmers Insurance, Allstate, State Farm. All of these will offer business liability insurance, and it's good to just do some investigation to see which one is going to work best for you. Product liability insurance is important because as a business, even though you may have a product that you think is protected, you may want to consider obtaining some additional insurance to give you better protection for that product that you're selling. Completed operation insurance, if you don't have a product but you have a service, then you may want to consider completed operation insurance. If you're providing a service that you are putting, something together, you're a plumber, you're electrician, you work on, putting down floors. This type of insurance will help in case something goes wrong when the services that you're providing. And so this site gives you all about the different kinds of insurances that we just discussed. Branding is probably a term that has a lot of implications. It really is about communicating who you are, your organization's information, the values that you possess, and also it says a lot about your products and the services that you're going to sell. So when you think about branding, don't just think about the colors, the logo, think about the foundation that your business ultimately is promoting and what you are promoting through your business. It is really a communication concept, and the characteristics that go along with it are based on the kind of brand that your customer wants as well. In speaking of the values, it is important for you as a startup to identify the values that will be representing your business. Very important. These days, people do not trust you. And because of all the scams that occur and the fly-by-night businesses, then your business is also liable to that same representation and misrepresentation that occurs. So having a set of values that you can communicate will really help to give trust and build the trust with your potential client. Establish a mission. Where are you going? What type of business do you have? What is it that you do? What products and or services will you provide, and in what way? Are they going to be reliable? Are you going to guarantee it? What is your mission for the potential client who is looking for your product or service? And finally, it's important to establish the goals that are focused on the client that you want. What is the goal that you have for that client? If I am going to give you $100 for that service that you're just providing me, what do I get for $100? Those are really critical components that begin to build trust in with the client. It is important that once you have those values and you've got the brand defined, now you can market. So the first step to marketing is to understand who is that individual that you want as a target. Where are they? And it's important to establish the components of keeping in touch with those individuals. You have so much money as a startup. And therefore, what you want to be able to do is to target the right customer that may be looking for what you have. And remember that it's really the source of the competitive advantage that you're going to get. Already, I can guarantee you that everyone that's on this website, on this webinar, already has competitors. The question is, what do you have as an advantage to all of those competitors that are out there that are already in business and taking away your potential customer? That's important. Keep that in mind. So when you think about that competitive advantage, remember that a way to gain competitive advantage is to obtain the important research information that tells you who is it that you are looking for. It's the secondary research. It's the population that you want. And where do you find them? Well, you can look under U.S. Census, the city of Westminster, go to the city of Brighton, anywhere. All cities have a city website that has data about your city. So you're looking for that critical demographic information. How old are they? How much money do they have? What are they buying? Where are they at? Nowadays, there is so much information that you can actually pinpoint that type of client that you are going to solicit to. Another type of way to obtain competitive advantage is to seek primary research. And what is primary research? Primary research is the kind of research that tells you that I like what you have. And if you can find me, that's number one. Number two is you have to start asking me questions to determine if I am your potential client or not. So primary research is the kind of research that you develop with surveys, questionnaires, focus groups, those are very important because it eliminates individuals who don't want what you have, but it connects you with those individuals that are looking for what you have. And therein lies being able to use the $1 to the best advantage to bring you back 100. Very important information. It is a very essential tool to marketing and to targeting and to creating a competitive advantage. So in general, what value do you have that you can add to your service or your products? And what is it that you will provide? How will you communicate that? And what does your competition provide? Is there a way that you can figure out the value that you have as compared to your competition? Because that would give you the advantage one way or the other. You've got to ask customers what they want. You've got to shop your competition, and then you have to analyze that competition so that there's more ability to market to the right person. Another component that is critical to startups always is the organizational structure. I would say in the time that I've been providing services to small business owners, this is a very high need area. And usually I'll get a client that comes in and says, I need marketing. But once I begin to really analyze the needs, the reality is that they need organizational structure. If they knew how to keep good records, if they could collect the right kind of data, and they could manage and plan the process and then analyze all of those components, then they probably don't need marketing. They just need to focus in on the data and make decisions based on all of this information. And that is really one of the areas that I would say is a very high need, but not very often adhered to. So when you think about keeping records, for example, it's really about the performance and how you measure the profitability, the growth, and the changes that are going to occur in your business. It's about making decisions and the right kinds of decisions that ultimately will give you the next advantage to your competition. Also, record keeping helps you to actually report to the individuals that want the information. So when you think in terms of record keeping, what you really want to do is have a good filing system so that all of that record keeping can be organized and your data is established in either hard copy or within the cloud. Both. Very important to have both kinds established. Once you have the concept of that data collection and how that gets organized, the next most important piece is to learn that you will need to manage that set of information. So planning and setting up the business, all of that obviously is something you've already done. Now you need to understand how you're going to continue to raise the business needs. And it's going to be through your management. So you've got to really establish a good planning of all of what you're doing for your financial affairs. Remember, the heart of the business is your financial information. And how you manage that is going to be critical in the decisions that you make. So if you're ever going to have employees, the way to truly grow and gain, high probability of having profits and making money in a business is to have employees. You as a one-person individual have a capacity. You can only do so much. You have 168 hours and you have personal time and you are going to have business time and you will have a capacity of that time yourself. In reality, you can only make so much. But if you have employees, the sky's the limit. And that is part of the next step to be able to manage efficiently and effectively. So going with the monitoring process and controlling the operations of the record keeping, making sure that your product and service is controlled, analyzing all the financial components, and then working with your team. Every business owner, even if you are one person business, you should have 5 individuals as your team. You should have an accountant. You should have an attorney. And even if you don't hire that attorney, to know an attorney, to know that they're there when you need them is going to be important. Have a banker. You should have an insurance agent. And you should have a business advisor. Great connection with SBDCs to be able to meet with a business advisor at least once a month, once a quarter, to help you guide to the next level of where your goals are going. Again, important components to the organizational structure. Once you have those components in place, the system analysis becomes the most important foundation to your business. If you have a good system analysis process in place, it doesn't have to be complex. It can be very simple. A nice set of Excel sheets could be as important as having an accountant information or having QuickBooks. As long as it's easy to understand for you and you are able to make decisions, as long as they can track the needed information, especially once you get into having to pay taxes. Remember, so a system analysis type of foundation, all it has to do is be reliable, it has to be accurate and consistent. The key is that it provides timely information about your business. And timely is relative. Do you need that information once a day? Do you need it once a week? But once you get past that, it probably is not reliable if it goes farther than if you only need it once a month. So keep those components in mind. As I mentioned, the heart of the business are your financial data. The one piece of data that is king to any business is cash flow. If your business can operate with cash flow statements on a monthly basis, it will show you how much revenue comes in that month. It will show you how much expenditures you have created that month, and it will show you how much you have left for next month. Critical information. Imagine if you could run a business and in January you created $500 in and you spend 200, you have 300 left. In February you have another 500, another 200, and you have another 300 left. Now you have 600. Now you're really gaining a sense of how much you're spending every month, and you're gaining how much you are able to run the business for next month. But it also tells you how much of a tax liability you might be facing. That's why cash flow information is so critical to a business. The income statement is really a tool that gives you the ability to understand on a quarterly basis, most likely, whether you are making profits or not. Very important as a secondary to the cash flow because it gives you critical information to how you are spending your revenue and where it's going. And of course, the third most important statement is going to be the balance sheet. Usually, businesses that are, 1, 2, 3 months old, you're not really going to need a balance sheet because you don't have a whole lot of assets. But balance sheets are just a snapshot of what point in time the value of your business is. It's kind of like having a home. After, 5 or 6 years, you have equity in a home. Well, the same thing with the balance sheet in a business. After a year, 2 years, you have acquired a set of assets, equipment, materials that have value, and therefore the balance sheet can give you that sense of how much this business has value. Along as we begin to think about the financial aspect, we have the business aspect and the taxes that take away from that process. And so, as I told you, I'm not a consultant, but definitely it's important here to say to you all, it's important for you to at least contact an accountant, a CPA, as you begin to develop the business to make your future a little bit more reliable in terms of what you owe and what you have to pay, and not find yourself, having to pay taxes more than you realized at the end of the year. So generally, the concept for a business is that if you sell, rent, or lease any personal property, then you have to obtain a sales tax license. The Colorado resale license is basically the same for the sales tax. If you sell, rent, or lease it to the end user, then that's really the same sales tax license. As part of the sales tax license, you can also obtain a wholesale license that you can use to purchase from other businesses products that you do not pay taxes to those businesses, but until you get to the end user. And then, of course, there's profit taxes, right? And those what we're talking about when you have created revenue and you have spent that through expenditures. And then before you actually have a profit, then you pay the tax, then you would realize a profit and the tax that you have to pay based on that profit. Remember that businesses, again, just a reiteration that those entities, LLCs and corporations, must pay estimated taxes on a quarterly basis based on how they set up their cash flow. Every business, most likely, whether you are a product or if in fact you are a service, you may be subject to use taxes. What is a use tax? A use tax is any type of taxation that occurs based on the fact that you use your materials. For example, you buy, let's say you're a service, and you're not going to be collecting taxes on products, but you buy a computer for your business and it costs you $2,000. And at the office max, you don't pay taxes because you're a business. And so on $2,000 at 8.5%, you're probably talking $160 if you were going to pay taxes on that. But because you're a business, you say, here's my EIN. I'm a business. I'm not going to pay taxes on this. And they'll agree with that. They don't charge you $160. But the city you're in may require you to pay a use tax, because you're using that computer for your business. So at the end of the year, they will ask if you have bought any products that you are using that you did not pay taxes on because you're a business. So the city probably will charge you, for example, in Westminster, about 5.2, 5.3, something like that. And then you pay that portion of the tax. That is what is called a use tax. Property taxes, again, assets in that are with property, land, furniture, equipment, all those, obviously there are some taxes that you have to pay that are called property taxes. Anyone that runs an internet business that sells products in the state of Colorado, if you sell products to anyone in Colorado, then you must collect a tax. If you sell products to someone outside of the state of Colorado, then you don't have to collect the tax. Again, very important for you to connect with a tax accountant to understand this whole process with the internet sales because they have changed. This is a great publication. It's on the colorado.gov site. You can just download it, and it gives you a lot of great information about the information related to how you calculate your tax, the license that you must obtain, how do you collect the tax, the forms that you use, and how you record it, and just general information about taxes. Really good resource. And I recommend if you can just download it and put it on your laptop, it's a great resource. A thought about IRS and taxes, great resources. The IRS does give you a good set of information, deducting business expenses. You can get those under the IRS website. And also, there's a good publication on home office deductions, all based on IRS information. Any questions about taxes that I probably can't answer, but you can ask them. How's that sound? Okay. Let's move to our last phase here, which is really, as I told you, a very important area, and that's the business plan. I respect so much anyone who has a good foundation to at least begin to work with their ideas based on some form of planning. I'll give you just a general overview that if you are going to borrow money, most likely you're going to need a pro forma business plan. Not all of you are going to do that or need to obtain, some infusion of capital from a lender. But if you do, then most likely they're going to want what they call a pro forma, that's called at least 3 to 5 years of a financial projection with the market research, what your business model is, the planning, the long-term goals, how you're going to develop these strategies, and any additional resources that you can show. That would be an important aspect, and we can definitely help with that process if you're looking to obtain a loan. As I said, we'll work with you to obtain from different type of lenders that might be connected to what your needs are. So here are again, just the components of the pro forma business plan. If you are not looking for a loan, but in fact you want a high probability of success, then my suggestion is do a 1-year plan. The 1-year plan provides you with what are you going to need for startup costs? Critical, because even if you are funding your own business through your own um, assets, then at least you know how much you're putting into your business, or as I would say, how much you're lending your business because you become the lender. If you set up your brand, your values, your mission, your goals, and what you're going to do in that year for on a monthly basis, including marketing, organization, and the management, then you can actually create a forecast of what you want and should be able to get back in terms of your amount of revenue per month. That would be a great business plan. And guess what? After a year, you look at it again and you create another set of goals that build upon the first year. So, something to think about as you work through a startup concept here. And so the action really begins to be established on the living process of your activity. And that's what we call an action and accomplished goal plan. An important aspect of this whole process of why we do this is to kind of give you a good sense of preparation. Because, there's a lot of reasons why businesses fail. There's a lot of reasons why only 7% make it in the state of Colorado. Not one of these, we cannot say there's only one item that defines the failure or the dissolving of the business. Maybe it's not a failure. Maybe it's just that there were too many variables that occurred at the same time, and that created the change for that individual. So it is important to lower your risk, get some support, be prepared to work, look at the facts, and leverage your strengths. Look at your talents and work with your areas of high need, and get experience that will give you that ability to take your business to the next level. Remember, there are a lot of assistance programs, and we are one of them. So again, I just want to review that, through SBDCs, we're here to give you one-on-one support, help you develop the business, create and continue with seminars, workshops, and just look at what is available throughout on a month-to-month as you're growing your business. So what is the next steps for you? This is important. Think about, where are you going from today? Look at additional resources. You need financial templates. You need to look at, working with an accountant. You need to borrow money. You need to set up marketing strategies. These are all components that are important for your next steps. All right, my friends, we are at the end. And I hope that you're still awake, right? Any questions?
Got a clap from somebody there, Marcella, saying good job. A lot of thank yous in the chat as well. Jesse, thank you so much. That was amazing. Before we close it out, I just want to reiterate a couple little things that Jesse touched on in terms of the resources and sort of a mindset moving forward. Heidi, you have a question?
Thank you so much, Raul. Yeah, Jesse, thank you so much for the amazing presentation. It was great. I was taking notes as much as I could. Raul, I'll try to follow up with that email of the slide deck. But yeah, my question is around for a brick and mortar retail oriented business. Are there any resources that you guys may have available to guide someone getting started?
Is that question for me or for Raul, Heidi?
Either.
Okay, well, I can tell you, my first uh, feedback to you is, I would say connect with one of our um, consultants, advisors on a one-on-one, and let's see what your needs are based on that retail, where you're at, what resources you already have, how we can accentuate the resources you have, and then be able to add a bit more to the foundation that you have started. I mean, again, do you need a brick and mortar place? Do we connect you with different spaces? Do we connect you with some different owners? Do we help negotiate, the lease? I mean, what are all of those things that we can do to help to give you more power in the startup process?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jesse. I'll definitely follow up with you guys.
Thanks.
Yeah, and just a touch on that, Heidi, and everyone in general, the best next step that makes the most sense, usually provides the greatest value, is to schedule a free one-on-one advising with an SBDC advisor. So if you want to connect with Jesse specifically, I dropped his link in the chat. I will also put that in a follow-up email with a recording and the slides. We also have other lead advisors that have this general knowledge of various components of business, and some have some specialties as well that may benefit you more than another advisor. But definitely, I would say connect with Jesse one-on-one, and then from there, he's a hub for pointing you towards various other resources, whether that's another advisor within our network, other services like chambers, or other groups that can help your city that would benefit you. And really quickly, this particular series is sponsored by the city of Westminster. So we want to thank them and their contributions that help to allow this. And they are going to have a talk next Wednesday from 7 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. on their specific resources. So anyone that's already a business in Westminster, is thinking about starting in Westminster, or is just curious to hear what Westminster has available, that's a good thing to do. I put that in the chat as well. You need to email them to register for that talk. And just put the subject line as the title of the talk there. Just say I would like to register. And then we also have a third part of this series that we've are starting brand new this time, which I think is a huge value add. And actually, she is on this call herself, Miss Karen Patel, who's another lead advisor and also a business finance specialist advisor. And she's going to talk about more of the finances, really open up that conversation to go a little bit more in depth, still within the beginning concept. So all those sheets that Jesse talked about, cash flow, she's going to go into that more in depth, a little bit about how your personal finances connects to your business finances, and trying to bridge that gap, like your credit, things like that nature are very important. And some other concepts too, definitions, and really bring your game up, your mental game up, and education around finances, so you can understand better what is it that you're looking at and whatnot. So that's what we're ultimately trying to do with this series here. So we thank you, Jesse, for starting that off, this awesome overview of startups.
One thing I might caution, Raul,
please.
I want to make sure people understand that just note that you can't just go to a specialist right away. Attorneys, we have accountants, and we have, the marketing. You have to go to a generalist to be able to guide you to one of those individuals. Just keep that in mind, because many times, the individual thinks they can go straight to, they send them back to us, and then that just confuses a lot of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. So best next step, like I said, our call to action, part of what we do here is we operate like a business in a sense. And if you're looking at marketing, something to think about in the future is you have a funnel. So webinar, these things that we do for that are wide net cast. Then we go, okay, what's your next step? Schedule with Jesse. He's a lead advisor. Like I said, he's a hub that then's going to be a resource to say, hey, go see this specialist within our network, and then help you from there. And that's how you're going to want to focus on that. And you can build your business around that same concept eventually too. So real quick question Regina had, who's the best for health and wellness related type business? So Regina, and the reason why I'm making this public, and generally this is sort of a good question for any of your specific questions around your business type. I would say, again, go see a lead advisor first, see Jesse first, and then he's going to point you towards, okay, hey, this is who you can talk to specifically around that industry. The question still remains, well, what do you want to do with that? Because that's still a broad category. Like, do you want to start a gym? That's a very specific type of business, brick and mortar, and how you're going to market and think about that versus a supplement, right? And that's a whole nother distribution channel and way of thinking about, what your needs are. And so, for example, I was a gym owner myself, and but I never had a supplement line, and I wouldn't know where to start if you had questions about how do I build a health and wellness business around supplements. So it really depends on what are you thinking, product, service, etc. Can greatly change the conversation, who we're sending you to and whatnot. So yeah, I'll follow up, and we'll send that information out, and then we'll go from there. So thank you all for being here. And thank you, Jesse. Thank you again.
Thank you all.
you.
Good afternoon.
Bye-bye.
All right.